Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
So I've been watching your Twitter feed very closely.
Yes, as you want to do.
Right. And we talked in the last show, why are conservatives at all concerned who the nominee for Supreme Court's going to be, because they're all super conservative. They're all vetted by the Federalist Society. What's there to complain about? But you seemed crestfallen that it was not Amy Barrett, and he chose Brett Kavanaugh. This was a better conversation.
Well, before we get into the substance, I am curious about your reading, your interpretations, your psychoanalysis of me based on my Twitter feed. What did you see? Is this like you reading between the lines, or is this just things that I specifically said or wrote?
I mean, I don't think I'm being the Matt Lewis whisperer here. I think you. I mean, you had a tweet saying, Trump did the conventional pick just to spite me.
Well, that was tongue in cheek,
right?
Yes, I am the hardest hit. Clearly,
I mean, I know you don't mean like you're going literally, but it did suggest you had a certain amount of investment. You wanted to see Amy Barrett.
Yes, I mean, if for no other reason, it was like the first time in a couple years where I felt like I was in my zone with my writing.
Do you think it's just because you were predicting it? I mean, the way this seemed to break down is Amy Barrett was the choice for anti-abortion, pro-life activists. Kavanaugh was the pick for both Bush world, but also immigration hawks. Ann Coulter was over the moon when Kavanaugh was picked because of some of his immigration-related rulings. And then you had people who I think had personal ties to Kethridge and Hardiman.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of those really fell along clean ideological lines.
For me, there were basically two different tracks, two different reasons I was pulling for Barrett. One is, you mentioned they've all been vetted by the Federalist Society, and I think that's generally a good thing if you're a conservative. But John Roberts was a Federalist Society guy, I think. And he is not. He is maybe going to be the next Kennedy. We saw what he did with Obamacare. I think he was actually wrong. I think about that. So Kavanaugh may not be a rock star conservative. He may not be the next Scalia. Like, he'll be fine. Don't get me. I'm sure he's going to be fine. He's not going to be.
I mean, there are people who say that he is going to be the next Scalia. That his writings actually display a Scalian tendency.
They say that about all of them. Remember Scalito? About Alito.
Is that wrong? Is Alito not been?
Well, he doesn't have the panache of a.
Well, no, I don't think Kavanaugh does either. But as far as their constitutional outlook,
yeah. Well, look, Scalia brought a certain, gravitas and
gravitas is not the word I would use there.
Intellectual heft to the bench as well as his decision. But anyway. I don't necessarily think Kavanaugh is going to be a suitor, but I don't personally think he's going to be this amazing conservative rock star. And I think that's problematic because I think this was your chance to put someone like really good on the bench, like a hardcore conservative, because I think you've got the squeeze on these Democrats who are running for re-election, Joe Manchin, Heidi Heitkamp, Donnelly in Indiana, where Barrett's from, and then maybe even Claire McCaskill. I think they were being squeezed with, and you never know if you're going to get another pick, right? Maybe another seat opens up and Barrett gets in, maybe never, right? So you never know. So I think it was a missed opportunity. Like, I think for my take is the fact that Kavanaugh seems to probably be sailing through confirmation suggests to me that we didn't make a good deal, right? So, like, if I'm going to buy a car from you and I'm like, I'll give you $10,000, and you're like, sold, I probably made a bad deal, right?
So you would have preferred to have Barrett because you think she would be more of a conservative rock star, even though there'd be an increased chance she would not even get confirmed.
Okay, so let's say that Trump nominates Barrett, and and there's a fight, does that help Republicans in the midterms or hurt them?
Let me back up a second. I'm thinking through the answer.
I haven't even gotten to my second reason for liking her yet, but we're still on track number one.
Of all the picks, Barrett is on record being the most hostile to stare decisis. She has written on the subject in legal journals before. I mean, and she doesn't say stare decisis is utterly wrong, and I would ignore it in every case. But she's especially made the argument that we should be less deferential to it. We should be more flexible in regards to stare decisis. That is squarely against everything that Susan Collins telegraphed what she wants to see in a nominee. She's not saying, Collins, I have a litmus test on Roe. She's saying, I want a nominee that's going to give great weight to stare decisis. So you would definitely make it the hardest to get Collins on board with Barrett. And here is Kavanaugh, who, as people are starting to report on now, I think it was just last year that he's giving a speech celebrating William Rehnquist's court legacy at the American Enterprise Institute, and he lauds his dissent in Roe as being an example of Rehnquist's great legacy in stopping the tide of the court expanding unenumerated rights and not adhering to law. So Kevin doesn't quite say, I agree with this dissent and I would overturn Roe v. Wade given the chance, but he's saying, I am celebrating Rehnquist's legacy, and he notes that because he didn't win in Roe, but he's saying he won other cases after that. I am embracing his legacy of someone who doesn't believe that the court should be declaring unenumerated rights in the Constitution like what happened in Roe. So if you can get a guy like that in with Collins' support, and Collins has telegraphed that she is probably going to support Kavanaugh, why would you not say hooray and worry about and not get hung on Barrett? Now, to your point about the midterms, if you lost Barrett, that would surely agitate the Republican base.
Is that good or bad for the Republicans going into the midterms?
I think it's probably good.
Right.
I mean, the pattern.
Exactly. It's a win-win. It's a win-win.
Well, that's a lose win.
It's a win-win.
You don't get your person on the court.
You either get Barrett, or you get a reason to vote Republican in the midterms.
I think you take the court pick. You pocket the win.
What happens? Okay, let's say that Barrett were not to be confirmed. That creates energy and excitement in the Republican base to come out and vote in November. And then, number one, Republicans are going to hold the Senate. I think. Number two, you could always confirm a judge right after that, couldn't you?
Well,
like in the late duck session.
If it wasn't a up or down vote, things are stalled like a Merrick Garland. We're just not talking about this here. We haven't reached a conclusion to this.
Yeah.
And then you had a great midterm. You expand your ranks in the Senate or whatnot. Then you might get a second bite at that apple. But
I think Kavanaugh would have been a great go-to if Barrett were not confirmed.
But so
then you settle on Kavanaugh.
So what constitutes a great midterm, I think, isn't necessarily Republicans adding seats. I think the most likely scenario is Republicans are going to lose seats in the House no matter what. If you can energize your base, you might mitigate those losses, and you might hold the Senate. And I know that's probably sound advice for Republicans to shoot for. I don't know if that would necessarily, that scenario then guarantees you get Barrett post-election. You might still, Collins still might have no reason to budge, might still be able to keep red state Democrats on board, and she still can't get through. So it's a pretty high-risk play there.
No, I'm saying you either get Barrett or you either get Barrett, A, or B, you don't get Barrett, you energize your base, and then you nominate Kavanaugh.
I mean, you can get, we got from Robert Bork.
What? Like,
We got from Bork to Kennedy.
He likes to fight, and we're told that he likes to fight. That was my whole premise for why I thought he was going to do this. Why wouldn't you do this?
Because you might lose it all. I mean, you might get what I called for, which I don't think is going to happen now, which is Collins partners with the red state Democrats and says, you're not getting anybody off of your Federalist Society list. You have to pick someone in bipartisan consultation. I see what you do when you're left to your own devices. I now have the backup to deny you that. And you.
Well, I think that was all. I mean, Bill, we discussed this last week. I love your creative thinking. I think that one was always quixotic because I think that deal would have really opened up the door for Donald Trump barnstorming Montana and North Dakota and West Virginia and Indiana, and definitely Republicans would pick up seats in the Senate if that corrupt bargain were to happen. I think Republicans would maybe lose. Who knows about the House, but in the Senate, I think they would pick up seats. So to me, this was
you don't see the centrist resurgence that would have occurred, that the center would have held, and the bipartisans would have risen up from their couches and stormed West Virginia, North Dakota, and Missouri.
The center will not hold, Bill. I don't see it, and so I honestly, like, strategically thinking, to me this made a ton of sense. If Barrett's confirmed, you get a great judge. By the way, here's my second reason: a woman who's 46 years old. She's going to be on the court for 40 years. If they ever do overturn Roe versus Wade, you would have a woman in the majority, probably writing the majority opinion.
If Jordan Peterson could hear you now, Matt, to say we should be picking somebody on the basis of their gender.
Here's the thing. I don't think that Kavanaugh is a better. This is not an affirmative action pick. She is utterly qualified, but I do believe in diversity. And how many? I'm a white guy. I'm all for white guys. I don't have a problem with white guys. How many of them can we pick consecutively?
Matt, you are selling out your identity. You're selling out the white men.
You get Bill. I can't believe what you're saying. I can't believe. No, but here's the irony. And I wrote about this, and I didn't write about it. I tweeted about it. But it strikes me as interesting that the safe pick for Donald Trump, in fact, I would say almost always the quote-unquote safe pick for a Republican is the white man. Think of it. You just pointed out that Kavanaugh, when it comes to stare decisis and precedent, Kavanaugh is essentially where Barrett is. Okay.
Well, I don't know that. Okay. Barrett's more on the record about it, but
she's still not on the record. She is more on the record.
Right.
She's never said she's never said I'm going to overturn Roe, and precedent means precedent.
I think it's quite clear what's in Kavanaugh's heart is that Roe is bad and wishes it wasn't there.
But here's my point: if Trump had picked Barrett, there would have been a shitstorm, and Republican women, Collins, for example, Murkowski, possibly, would have come out against her. Why is it that when you pick a young conservative woman, or I would even say Hispanic for that matter, that is a risky pick?
Well, I don't think it's not about the gender. It's not about race. It's about.
I think it partly is.
She was a risky pick because she had written so much about her lack of full deference to stare decisis. That was.
But Kavanaugh gave this speech at AEI about Rehnquist.
And look, the Democrats are. The more people learn about that speech, they're going to be livid. And Collins is going to get a truckload of coat hangers sent to her office now. But Collins' own words are not about a narrow litmus test on Roe. They're about stare decisis. And Kavanaugh's speech about Rehnquist was not about stare decisis. It was about his dislike of the court enshrining unenumerated rights. And it doesn't tell you directly. I mean, you might connect the dots and say this means he's not going to care about stare decisis, but we don't know that based on the words on the page.
All right. So I just want to put a pin in that part. I just want to go back to the larger point, which is this. Kavanaugh is a fine pick and may go on to be a probably will go on to be a perfectly fine Supreme Court justice. I just think that the opportunity presented itself where you could have made a bolder pick, and it was really a win-win proposition. Either you get her, thereby getting a great pick and exciting your base. And by base here, I'm not talking about the red hat wearing Trump base. They're with him no matter what. They're Fifth Avenue Trump supporters.
You're talking social
right?
conservative base.
Right. I'm talking about the people who kind of held their nose and supported him because of the judicial picks. You either get a great justice who excites people, who makes them more likely to vote in the midterms, or you pick a fight that you're going to win either in the court of public opinion or, failing that, by motivating, she's being borked. It's a high-tech lynching, whatever. Turn out and vote in November. See, right now, midterms, as you know, midterms have always been about turnout. But that's even more true now than ever, right? Because we have this polarization. Very few people are being, persuaded intellectually. It's whether your people turn out or their people turn out. Well, right now, liberals have the energy to turn out because Donald Trump is seen as a fascist and as an authoritarian. So liberals are not going to have a turnout problem. Trump and Republicans' challenge is, do they turn out when Trump isn't on the ballot, right? Didn't work for Barack Obama. Will it work for Trump? Maybe if there was a reason to turn out. Maybe if there was a fight. Oh, guess what? Think the Supreme Court might turn out Republican voters? You think they might be motivated to vote on the Supreme Court? I don't understand the logic in this pick, personally. The odds are he's going to sail through smoothly. To me, and I argue that is in this environment, that is a bug, not a feature. It's an example of why it was not a bold enough pick.
Is it possible, Matt Lewis, that your electoral analysis is colored by your desire to see Roe v. Wade overturned, and you believe that Barrett was a more likely prospect to do that than Kavanaugh?
I think all of us should be introspective and should realize that our opinions, even if it's subconscious, are informed by our worldview. And we have to constantly be careful that we are not, that our analysis is not sort of being retrofitted to reflect our personal preferences or biases. So I would say, first of all, I don't even know if Roe, I think that my guess is that there would be more of a gradual sort of thing. I would prefer maybe a culture of life. There will be backlash if Roe ever is overturned. There will be a backlash, and that's going to be a cost benefit analysis someone else is going to have to do as to whether or not it's actually, but anyway, I think that I'll tell you, being introspective, I will tell you that I think the bigger concern or the bigger thing I ask myself is, am I biased toward trying to elevate young people, women, and minorities in the conservative movement? Because if you look at my track record, Bill, it's a lot of Sarah Palin and a lot of Marco Rubio. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And in the case of Sarah Palin, and I still to this day argue that she started off with much better potential and was radicalized and got progressively worse. Having said that, she is what she is. And the fact that I was, 10 years ago, a booster of hers doesn't look great in hindsight, Now, I don't think that's fair to Barrett, because I think Barrett, I think part of what hurts Barrett, to be honest with you, and this is not fair and this is not right, but I think that that Sarah Palin and, to a lesser extent, Michelle Bachmann actually have chastened Republicans and conservatives against people like Barrett and women of a certain age, and by a certain age I mean 40-ish, 46, 47, whatever she is, who are, moms and dare say attractive. And I don't think it's fair to hold that against them, because Barrett has a lot of accomplishments. She's a Notre Dame law professor. She clerked for Scalia. She's a sitting judge. But I think that there's something subconscious there, that there's a bias against them. I think I've actually had maybe the opposite. I've been very interested in trying to elevate young conservatives, female conservatives, and mainly Hispanic conservatives. And I sometimes have to ask myself, in the case of Barrett, I really tried to ask myself, like, is this a sort of an identity politics thing, or maybe a reverse identity politics, or is there more to it? In the case of Barrett, I think there were compelling reasons, both substantively and politically, for her to be the nominee. And I think I've laid them out pretty good. I actually think this is a smart political strategy. And the weird thing about it is, if Jeb Bush were president, I would totally understand him picking Kavanaugh. Like, this is a Bush pick. Kavanaugh is an establishment Bush guy. I could see Jeb wanting to play it safe. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want to be attacked. Let's just, no drama, right? Donald Trump should want this kind of pick. He should want to pick this kind of fight. And the fact that he didn't does irk me a little bit.
So,
because he picks up, I'm sorry I keep picking, but he picks fights that don't matter all the time. He picks fights about kneeling in football games.
Right.
And yet, when he has a chance to, and he does it because he gets that the culture war works and that there are political benefits, even if it tears the country apart, he gets it. So he's picking a fight about an issue that's sort of a non-issue until he makes it an issue, for political reasons. Now he has an opportunity to pick a real fight with real consequences, a real upside. And he says, we don't need a fight. Let's go with a safe pick. Let's go with the Bush establishment guy.
Well, I think I can explain that. So I think I'm
gonna let you talk now.
I think you have a philosophy that it is good for conservatism,
yes,
to diversify its ranks.
Yeah,
it's not healthy for conservatism to be seen as a white male enterprise.
I completely agree with
that. And a large reason why Republicans got behind Trump is that he actively rejects that philosophy. The whole notion that Republican Party can't survive, it's a white male Christian party. Trump said, screw you, buddy. That's exactly what it is and what it's going to be. And we're not going to buy this politically correct nonsense.
I think you're right.
So the notion that it would be good for you to have a woman, if you want to strike down Roe, you might as well have a woman in there. You don't want to have 5 white guys or 5 guys striking down Roe. Trump says, I don't care. The whole point here is that this doesn't matter, or even actively males should be dominant, and therefore I'm not going to abide by that.
I'm okay with I don't care, which to me is colorblind. In this case, I think it's almost the opposite. Like, we need a white guy is what Donald Trump is basically saying. Because
arguably that is part of the calculation. I can't read the guy's mind, but you hear a good amount of that if you're entertaining any notion of diversity, you're automatically doing something for the less qualified person. And therefore, by picking the white guy, I am proving that I'm picking the most qualified person.
And the other thing, this guy Thapar, Judge Thapar out of Kentucky, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. He would have been. Now, I am not an attorney, not a judge, not a constitutional expert. Maybe he's not ready for prime time. I don't know. But supposedly, he was Mitch McConnell's favorite. He would have been the first Indian American Supreme Court justice if he were nominated and confirmed. And the first Asian, nothing. Not even like the guy. Maybe I don't know. Like he didn't make the short list. He would have. I wonder about that as well. Like, why not? There might be a good reason. Maybe chime off with the comments.
McConnell does not have the inside track in Trump world. Although I do think, based on what we know, that McConnell's saying, look, you're going to have a hard time getting this person through. That aspect of McConnell's persuasive powers, does have some merit.
No, that's not true, Bill, because he said Kavanaugh was one of the people he warned about.
Well, he warned that maybe the documentation is going to take some time, but my understanding was that he wasn't saying he can't get confirmed, just that it would be a bit more, be a bit more of a lift, but not that
I don't think he said any
problem.
of them. I don't think he said any of them couldn't get confirmed. I think he said Barrett could be challenging because of Collins and Murkowski, and Kavanaugh could be challenging because of his extensive record on the bench, right. A paper trail on the bench, right? So I think he was pushing for what's the other guy's name?
Ketheridge and Hardiman?
Yes, how quickly we forget. But anyway.
But to go back to another point I want to make about Trump's calculus and your point about him fighting, he does love to fight. And he does fight for things that seem totally nonsensical and politically irrational. But to go back to what I said in the last show, not with judges. He does not screw around on judges, especially the Supreme Court. I mean, he had a couple of clunkers at the lower court level, which I think they're trying not to repeat those mistakes. Their MO has been that getting conservative judges is integral to maintain Republican-based support, and you don't screw around with it.
Look, I would agree that you shouldn't take any irrational risks with this. That this is not, put points on the scoreboard, right? I'm down with that. And this is not this is this would have been a calculated risk. And maybe there's something I don't see here, but as far as I could tell, there's really no downside to that. This was a calculated risk that I think there were multiple.
Barrett would be a wise calculated risk.
I think so. Maybe
I get the play you're thinking about, but it's a high risk play. It's not a low risk play.
How does it go wrong?
It goes wrong by not getting your person on the court, and
you get Kavanaugh. And if you don't get Barrett, you get Kavanaugh.
Well, once you don't get something, you can't control what happens next. People might thought
you can control who you nominate.
I'm going to get Douglas Ginsburg, and you didn't get Douglas Ginsburg. The bottom can go farther than you might think once you lose in a big way like that. And whatever benefit you might get on election day, maybe you get that base bump, but you can't bank on it. You can't bank on being big enough to yield other political benefits. So it's just high risk.
I don't think it's high risk. I think it's a risk, but I think it's a calculated risk. And I think it's one that I would have taken. And Trump should be more gutsy than me. I'm like Mr. Prudent,
you would have taken it because you want to see the ranks diversified, and Trump doesn't.
You think that's the fundamental difference between me and him regarding this nomination?
I think he is not driven at all to diversify ranks. So that does not become. I might take this risk because I really want to get an African American or a Latino or a woman. That does not enter the equation in any respect.
I mean, look, again, I don't like identity politics. I don't think that you should discriminate against a white man because he's a white man. Having said that, if we get to a point where the only people in the Republican Party are white men, what about the young women today who are looking for a hero, someone to look up to?
I hate to break this to you, Matt. You are making the liberal argument about diversity. You're making the argument that diversity is strength. I mean, that is the argument.
No, I think diversity is strength. But see, there's good diversity. So I'll give you an example. We need diversity, but we also need, look, in terms of immigration, for example, I would say diversity is strength, but we also need assimilation, right? Too much immigration, too fast. We're not connected. We don't trust each other. So, but by and large, I've always been a fan of diversity.
You know what I'm saying? I welcome you to the party. I mean, I'm just letting you know. I mean,
I don't think that's that's liberal. That's liberal, like the term liberal democracy. It's not liberal like progressive, in my opinion.
I mean, obviously, I think you would not agree with the way or how far some people on the left take the argument. But the basic diversity argument is that having people from different backgrounds is a strength in and of itself. It is a positive to get those different kinds of perspectives. It's a positive to let people know these avenues are not cut off to you, and seeing that reflected in the upper echelons of society. That is this is the whole affirmative action argument in the Supreme Court. It's a compelling interest for government to want to achieve those goals. Now, as far as how does this hurt certain folks, how do people get discriminated against, that's obviously where these principles become complicated. But the basic goal
this is not an affirmative action pick. It's not an affirmative action pick because Barrett is highly qualified and actually the best choice. Right. That's not affirmative action. That is her being the best choice. Promoting it would be a meritocracy. Now, look, people are going to say no because the argument against that, the legitimate argument against that would be to say that she had only been on the bench for like 8 or 9 months. And if that's your point, if you believe that you can't be a Supreme Court justice unless you've been in the circuit court for a dozen years, then I would concede that.
Roberts wasn't that. Thomas wasn't that. Plenty of people got people got to go with no judicial experience.
You don't even have to be a lawyer or a judge. But my point is, if someone came to me and said, I don't think Barrett was qualified because she hasn't been a judge long enough, I would say that's a legitimate reason. Like, okay, how are you going to make it into the Hall of Fame if you've never played shortstop a day in your life?
It's a legitimate reason if you are applying that standard to everybody.
Yes.
If you have always, I did not want John Roberts. He was not on the bench long enough. If you said that back then,
right.
Barrett now, I'll say, okay, you have a consistent point of view.
I would argue that there is a subtle sexism at play that says somebody like Barrett isn't experienced enough when it doesn't say that about someone who is a male.
You are such a communist, Matt.
So now I want to go back to my other point about affirmative action. I don't want the government telling me or anybody, you've got to have this percentage of women. You've got to have this percentage of Asian. Yeah, I don't want that. Now, if I'm a boss and I'm thinking, how do I'm hiring people. Do I want everyone who looks like me, who thinks like me? Hell, of course not. How are we going to compete? We want everyone buying our product. We want to win. We want to outsmart other companies. So we have to have different people with different perspectives. And that's good. That's helpful for my company if I have different types of people who have a different background, who can help me sell to different types of people and outsmart different types of people. That's what I want as a CEO, right?
I'm thoroughly enjoying you watching you join the left in real time.
I think I've always been this. I don't think I've changed, right? This is have I changed, or is this basically?
I don't think you have changed. Maybe someday you're going to realize, wait a second, my views are not shared by almost anybody else in the party that I'm in, so maybe I should switch parties.
I feel like my views are consistent with Ronald Reagan, Ben Sass, Marco Rubio. You know what I mean? Like, am I wrong about that?
I can't speak to any of those guys.
Reagan, I've never talked to them about this. I've never met Reagan.
Reagan's history on race is a little complicated.
Yeah, but it's also different. Yeah, a different era. But
yes, and I really don't know what Sass Rubio think about these questions that I've not read their writings on the subject or their speech on the subject, but possibly.
And Reagan also picked the first female Supreme Court justice, Sandra Day O'Connor.
Yes.
So
I mean, he campaigned on that. in 1980, and then it was like, oh crap, I gotta actually do it now.
Well, he did it.
He did do it.
And Barry Goldwater was sort of her
Arizona. They're both Arizona.
So
I want to shift gears and talk about the electoral impact of this, though.
All right.
Because you're focused on how Barrett would have energized the social right in a way that Kavanaugh may not. But I do think Kavanaugh is more electorally complicated for red state Democrats, of which there are many running for re-election for the Senate. There are 10 of them. And any Supreme Court situation was going to be complicated for them, just like it's complicated for Susan Collins in Maine. Although
I don't
Maine's not
think
up
he's
until
complicated.
2020. What's that?
No, I think they vote for. I think they have to vote for him. That's why it's not complicated.
Well, I think some will, but it's still complicated. I mean, for a Democrat to win in a red state, they have to do two things in tension with each other. They obviously need to win swing votes. They can't, if they can't win on Clinton votes alone or Obama votes alone, they need to get Trump votes or to get Romney votes or what have you. But at the same time, they do need what base exists in those states. They have to show up. Because they're not winning landslide races. They're winning races by a hair. So if Democrats stay home, that's also a problem. So how do you do both things? Now, I do think in those states, by and large, Democratic base voters are savvier. They know who their neighbors are. They know what a tough thing it is for a Democrat to win in those states, so they cut them more slack. But if it's a game of inches, anything you lose from your base is a potential risk. So for a Barrett type situation, who could have lost Collins and Murkowski, if a red state Democrat has bipartisan cover to oppose, and again, if they're doing things my way, making a bipartisan argument for how to get a bipartisan judge, I think that would be the best way for those Democrats to thread that needle. Now, you're probably not going to get cover from Collins and Murkowski. Now, you don't have that crutch to lean on. Now it's just an either or. If it is already fait accompli, this person's going to be a judge, some of them are going to say, this is a free vote. I might as well vote for the pick because it's not determinative whether this person is on the court or not. And I can then trade on my bipartisan bona fides. I was a knee-jerk against Trump. You can trust me to be independent as I've always been in service to the state. For some, I think that's a tougher call. For example, Claire McCaskill in Missouri. Not only do I think she is very steadfast on reproductive rights, she really needs St. Louis and Kansas City to show up in big numbers. That's how you win in Missouri. If there's deflation there, she has a problem. Tester in Montana, he's never won with 50% of the vote. He's won because a libertarian has siphoned off a handful of votes and allowed him to eke by with like a 48, 49% plurality. There are pretty deep blue pockets in Montana, like Missoula, for example. So if there is a hard left faction that doesn't show up for him, he's got to worry about that. Now, granted, we've seen his ads. Most of his ads are, boy, am I good at working with Trump. Look at all the legislation I've gotten passed with Trump's help, even though Trump is attacking him for sinking his VA pick. So Tester knows at the end of the day he needs those swing votes, but he's got to worry a little bit about his left flank. But if you're Manchin in West Virginia, if you're Heitkamp in North Dakota, if you're Donnelly in Indiana, if you're Doug Jones, who's not up this year, in Alabama, I think those folks are more likely to vote yes, assuming Republicans are unified.
So I think McCaskill is the asterisk. I mean, I agree. I think she's in a different category than Manchin and Heitkamp and Tester. So let's put McCaskill aside. But putting her aside, I would disagree with your premise that this is complicated. This is why I think Trump made a bad strategic pick, because it's not complicated. It's very obvious what you do. You vote for Kavanaugh. I mean, look, something crazy could come out about him, right? But I'm assuming that that's not going to happen, that this is what you see is what you get. It's an easy decision. If you're Heitkamp, if you're Manchin, if you're Donnelly, If you're Tester, you immediately come out and signal you're for him. You want this issue to go away. Like, the Supreme Court should not be what people are thinking about or focused on. That is why I think Barrett would have actually been a shrewder pick, because the left would have been very scared and angry and upset about having a 46-year-old woman on getting a lifetime appointment by a Republican. And it would have pressured, you would have seen immense pressure from the left for people like Manchin and Heidkamp and Donnelly and Tester to oppose her. They would have been under immense pressure, and they would have either had to go against their state and lose re-election, or badly burn. This would have created, if Trump wanted to destroy the left and get liberals and Democrats in a big fight against each other, this would have been such an opportunity to do that.
You know, Matt,
and I think he totally. Now, it's just vote for Kavanaugh, no biggie.
You're new to the left, so you don't understand the left's internal dynamics. I think Barrett would have been very, very unifying for the left, especially again if they could have picked off Collins and Murkowski and giving those folks cover. The one thing,
I just want to question you real quick. So you believe that it would have been easy for Heidi Heidkamp in North Dakota and Joe Manchin in West Virginia to vote against Amy Barrett in the Supreme Court?
If they had bipartisan cover and could make joint arguments with that bipartisan cover, and make it not a case of picking left versus Trump by saying we want to have centrism reign in the court.
I don't think rank and file people, just sort of regular people in North Dakota or West Virginia, give a damn about a senator from Maine, what she thinks.
Well, if it's Murkowski too, if not just maybe, if you have Maine and Alaska, that would be a broader coalition.
I think you're wrong. My gut is you're wrong, but maybe I'm wrong.
Let me make one additional point about the current state of play. So your point is this is easy for most of these people to vote for Kavanaugh. But let's remember, the Senate is a game of inches right now. It's 51-49, 50-49 if you take out McCain, who hasn't been in Washington for a long time, and we don't wish for.
No, by the way, let me just say, I think that John McCain should either come physically be here for that vote or step down and allow the Republican governor to pick an interim senator.
I don't know what's going on there, but it seems like
we wish him well. He's an American hero. But I'm
putting that aside. So Democrats need, so they need 2 votes. They need a net of 2 seats to control the Senate next year, and there are 3 races considered toss-ups right now, at least in the Cook rankings, Cook Political Report ratings, which are Dean Heller's seat in Nevada, the open seat in Arizona because Jeff Flake's not running again, and Tennessee because former Democrat Governor Phil Bresnaden is running a very strong race against Marsha Blackburn, who's very much on the far right. So if Dems won 2 of those 3 seats and held all of their other seats, they would win the Senate, and that is the end of the Donald Trump judiciary project.
That's like such a bank. I mean, that's the stars have to.
Yes,
completely.
I'm not saying it's a likelihood, but
I think it's more likely Republicans pick up seats than that Republicans lose this Senate.
That may well be. But if the court pick is something that puts Tester, even just Tester McCaskill, in a vice where there's no good choice for them because they're going to lose one way or the other, and these are going to be paper-thin races. If Democrats pick off one of those two, well, then they're not taking back the Senate. I mean, unless, Beto O'Rourke surprises us in Texas maybe and can compensate for one of those losses. I mean, what's going to be a challenge for Democrats is to not get too mad at those Democrats who do vote for Kavanaugh, because the ball game going forward is, let's actually get the Senate. So Clarence Thomas doesn't retire, or if Ginsburg or Breyer can't hang on, then they can't they can't fill that seat. And not to mention what happens on the lower courts. So the message should be going out of Democrats that everyone's very focused on the House, because if you win the House, at least you can block for the legislation. And some people aren't as confident about the Senate, but they should be redoubling the Senate efforts, because, man, if you could win there, then you're killing the judiciary project.
But I agree. I think Democrats need to keep their heads. They shouldn't. They should play the long game on this. Mm-hmm. Don't get bogged down on worrying about this, which I think is a fait accompli. Play the long game. Be strategic. Resist the temptation to freak out over something that's happening right now. Think long term.
Well, what have we learned today? That Matt is a democratic socialist, reverse racist. Welcome to the club. Is there a card you have to turn in? Do you have to turn in your Republican and good standing card to somebody? I
think that happened in January of 2016 or 2017. No, we do live in interesting times. I still argue that, I mean, if that's what because, I'm for all sorts of, I'm pro-life and I'm pro-liberty, freedom. I mean, you can get on the list, I like low taxes. I don't want onerous regulation. I mean, I think I'm conservative. I don't think you have to be a racist also. I don't think that's part of.
So, last week you were Reaganing. Last week you said Trump was Reaganing. The Matometer was off the charts. Now, do you say, while Trump is in the midst of destroying the international world order and weakening NATO, is getting Gorsuch and Kavanaugh worth this trade?
Yeah. It's almost, I don't even know if you can quantify those things, because they're almost two presidencies. You know what I mean? I would have.
This is what Bill Kristol had. Sorry, go on.
The way I would think of it is, if I could go back in time, I would not have voted for Trump. And I did not vote for Trump. If I could take my chances and have Rubio be the nominee and see how the election plays out, I would still do that. But I can't do that, and we've got Trump. There's some bad stuff I don't like happening, and there's some good stuff I do like happening. I'm going to root for the good stuff and bemoan the bad stuff.
Was it sort of where Bill Kristol is? I mean, Bill Kristol has been a pretty vociferous Trump opponent, but had a tweet that said, you can be pro-Kavanaugh and anti-Trump. And Max Boot has been putting out there, conservatives, think about what you're doing here. Is getting these judges really worth it with everything that's falling down all around us? And I granted, I'm not a Republican, but I would lean towards the Max Boot argument, and I would say, to Kristol, I'm pro money. I like money, but if someone's going to try to bribe me, here's some money so I can buy your silence and do all these awful things. It's not very honorable for me to say, I love money. Just because I'm taking this money doesn't mean I love the guy giving me the money and the thing.
Well, no, I think the bribe would be
because I'm shutting up.
I think the bribe would be if you get the stuff and then you vote for him again because you got the stuff. But I think that's a false. For me, this is more like, I don't want to go to Scottsdale, but they forced me onto the plane, and now we're going to Scottsdale. and I don't want to go there, but they've offered me that I could watch TV and eat pizza on the trip. What good is going to come of it by saying no? So don't give me the pizza.
So instead of having a revolution and rebelling against your overlords, you are going to sacrifice your personal liberty for creature comfort.
The plane's going to land and not crash into anything when we get to Scottsdale. That's the question, right? Which analogy is this? What does this fit? Okay, so I guess theoretically, if I thought that Trump was Hitler, then I think you could certainly make the argument that you have to be 100% resistance 100% of the time. So give him no wins, nothing. He wants to do tax cuts. I like tax cuts. Guess what? We're not going to support him because that would help empower Hitler. He wants to nominate a great Supreme Court justice. I would love a great Supreme Court justice, but we can't do that because that would be giving Hitler a win. If you view Donald Trump as Hitler, then I think you could argue that anything that happens, good or bad, that you allow to happen is in a way you are enabling him. I think that's a little bit extreme. I think that's a lot extreme.
That's the straw man example. I mean, the real example is Trump is strengthening Putin and Erdogan in Turkey and Kim Jong-un while severely weakening our alliances with Europe and Canada.
But that has nothing to do with the Supreme Court pick.
Well, but
like those are bad things.
If you think,
why not get something good out of it?
If we're going to have things are so bad, these things are so egregiously bad that we cannot, and we're not going to reverse this damage in the future because we're going to permanently weaken America's role in the world. If it is that bad, you would say, okay, I need to stop this at all costs. It even sacrifices other things that I would like.
I don't know if it's that bad that he's making decisions that I disagree with. He's doing things that I don't like. I don't know that it's permanent. I don't know that anything is permanent in this world. Some things are, but I don't know that it's permanent. What I do know is he's doing bad stuff that I don't like. Why not get some good stuff out of it? Like, I didn't vote for him. I didn't put him there, but he's been thrust upon us. Why not if we're going to have to take the bad, and we are, why not get something good out of it too? But this is a huge discussion. Like, this is a big argument, you know?
And Max Boot is someone who is very focused on foreign policy and national security, so that clearly is that's his red line. Weakening the international world order should be the top preventing that should be the top priority, and everything else should be set aside.
I didn't even have Max Boot is holding Trump to a higher standard than I held Obama to. Like, when Obama was my president, I felt like he was weakening our standing around the world. I thought he was projecting weakness. I thought he was inviting provocation.
Perhaps you might revise those views at this point.
And yet, if Obama did something good, I would have said good. Like, when Obama did things I agreed with, I said good. Like, why would I hold my guy to a higher standard than I held the other guy to?
I will concur with that. You've always been very a la carte. You do judge people in general on a case-by-case basis. That's been your want for a while. So kudos to your consistency. Anything else you wanted to say before we head out?
I feel like this has been a very cathartic episode. I feel much more relaxed now after talking to you.
Well, I know. I sense that you were you thought he was Reaganing. He was more Nixoning, as we've learned, and or Bushing. Perhaps is more accurate. He was Bushing.
I think it was the Supreme Court thing was more of a Bush, a George W. Bush thing, probably.
So I'm glad you got to get some stuff off your chest.
I did.
All right.
I feel better. What do I owe you?
You owe me the next Supreme Court pick.
I don't know about that, but what I could do is go to patreon.com/Bill Scher.
Yes, give me money. Give me your money.
And hit the tip jar.
I will have a new Books and Politics podcast up. Should be tomorrow. Anesh Roy Chowdhury, new book, The Marginalized Majority. You'll love this, Matt, because it's all about defending identity politics. So it's right up your alley.
I guess it is. I talked to Dr. Wendy Mogul, who is a parenting expert, a child psychologist sort of expert, and got some free advice on how to raise my kids from her. She has a new book out. I guess her big famous New York Times bestseller was, what was it called? The Virtue of a Skinny. Anyway, talked to her, Dr. Wendy Mogul. Really good conversation. And I'm about to talk later today to Dan Abrams. He has a book out about Abraham Lincoln's last murder trial. Did you know he, as a lawyer, did murder cases?
I'm currently on Millard Fillmore.
Let me show this book. Hang on. I recommend it. This is a Dan Abrams book. And Lincoln's last trial, the murder case that propelled him to the presidency. Turns out he did multiple murder trials. They're really interesting.
I did not know.
Like, this would have been a legitimately... And Lincoln hired a transcriber for, like, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, who took down every word he said, and he had him on this trial. So most cases from this era are basically lost. You know, we don't know the details of them. Maybe the outcomes, but not the details. But, like, basically Lincoln's transcriber, you know, they didn't have a court guy doing this. So Lincoln hired a guy who did it. So it's pretty amazing.
I look forward to the podcast.
But you're on Millard Fillmore.
Yeah, so I'm reading a joint Zachary Taylor Millard Fillmore book right now. I just got past the point where Taylor dies after he drank. I think the general conventional wisdom is that he had tainted water or tainted milk or tainted cherries.
Cherries. I've heard cherries at the 4th of July, right?
Right, that's right. But immediately there were conspiracy theories that he was poisoned, because this was in the midst of the debate over the admission of California and New Mexico as free states, and which ended up leading to the Compromise of 1850. Taylor, who was a slave owner but was a relative moderate, was trying to get California and New Mexico accepted as free, saying these guys don't even want to be slave states. This is why you're making a big deal about this. Hey, South, just chill out. This is not a big conspiracy against you. Stop freaking out. And then when he died, people were writing letters to Fillmore saying, I know this was a conspiracy. I know Taylor was poisoned. You know, you're going to be next. You need to watch your back.
Wow.
And, you know, and to this day, you know, people still, you know, speculate, although there's been, you know, they exhumed Taylor's body several years ago and concluded that he wasn't poisoned, but people still kick that around.
You should talk to Erin, my wife. She went to the West Virginia State Finals with her paper about Millard Fillmore.
Is that right?
In high school, she wrote a paper about Millard Fillmore that went to state.
What was her thesis?
I don't know. I'll find out as soon as she reads my book. I'm going to read her paper. We're not doing it until she reads my book. All right. Still hasn't read my book.
What's that? She's read your book.
My wife still hasn't read my book.
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
All right, man. Thank you all. Thank you, Bill. Thank you all. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. And we'll be back here next week with another great episode.
All right. Take care.
All right. See you guys.